All right, welcome to the Big 12 Fall Camp Preview. This is again Brien Hanley, joined by Mike Casazza with 24/7 Sports West Virginia. Appreciate you, Mike, for making time for us today, man. We want to talk some good West Virginia football, see what's going on here now that fall camp has started. First things first, what's the kind of the overview of the team right now as it sits in fall camp after they've been through it for a couple of weeks?
We joked about this before we were talking on air here, Brian. But like I've seen a bunch of football this camp, which is probably like to people listening, that doesn't seem notable. You're a reporter, you should, right?
Right.
Not always the case. Like doors are closed a bunch. You don't see scrimmages, but we've seen like hours of football, which is kind of unusual, but also maybe not a surprise because this team brings back so many players on offense and defense that were either in like major roles or on the verge of major roles. So it's a team that people are really familiar with, and it just so happens that, they were good last year. They finished 5-1, got to 9 wins overall. They rolled in their bowl game, and again, like the core and more returns. So you have this anticipation that by and large hasn't existed. So, to answer your question, I think a lot of people, whether it's through my eyes or someone else's reporting or other video cameras or pictures, kind of feels like they know the team on top of anticipating the season. And oh, by the way,
right,
the biggest home opener, the biggest opener in like 26 years.
Right.
They play Penn State at home, number 8, number 9 in the country. That hasn't happened here. A home opener to start the season since number 1 Ohio State in 1998. So you have all these things that come together, and like you've got a yes, this is what it's supposed to feel like. I know the team. I'm seeing the team practice. They got a chance against a very good team at home. There's a lot of belief externally, and that matches up with everything you've seen and heard internally. You have coaches who are not being hyperbolic. They're just being matter of fact and stating things about players that, again, the fans know from last year or maybe even multiple years, and that they've had that belief, that insight supported by some of the reporting that's come out. So again, you take fan observations, the expert analysis of, not me, the coaches and the players, but also the second, third layer reporting. Everything kind of lines up for people who were excited and maintain that excitement as they get through like these dog days here, where it kind of gets like static and some of the reporting and some of the developments are maybe not what you want to be as exotic. Brian, exotic is not a great thing when you have so many answers and so few questions. So if West Virginia is just matter of facting this business like day after day and just stacking good days in a row, that is fine for this type of team and this type of preseason.
Well, I was going to ask, you touched on this just a little bit, and I was going to ask this later on, but I'll get to it now. Is you mentioned Penn State, opening up at Penn State. A lot of people don't really have the first game on their schedule. Can that really define their season? Now, I'm not saying this is going to define West Virginia's season at all, but can this kind of set the parameters? Here's the thing, and I'll say this. If they win, I think it can define West Virginia's season. If they don't win, I don't think it defines their season. And that's kind of the way that I feel like. Is that kind of the way that West Virginia fans kind of feel like? Because I feel like if they pull this thing off, and it's very possible, because I'm just not a believer in Penn State, I think it's very possible that West Virginia could beat them. But if they don't, I just don't think it's going to define their season if they lose the game.
Yeah, the Big 12 is their goal, and we've been over this ad nauseum. Like it's wide open. So you can go 0-1, you can go 1-2 in non-conference play. You win, I don't know, 7, 8 Big 12 games, you're fine.
Right.
Now, will that be the fate of a team that can't beat Pitt and that didn't get the job done against Penn State? I don't know. Hard to say.
Right.
I do think that there's just a great catapult opportunity if they do win the game, because now you're back in the conversation. Think about this, Brian. Like West Virginia returned quarterback, multiple running backs, 3 stars in the offensive line, almost all of it's receiving, and a bunch of pretty good players on defense. And I say I'm not going to be as detailed by defense because the Big 12 is by and large offense and running game now. If you had rewound, I don't know, 6, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, and you said West Virginia is bringing back a dual threat quarterback, multiple running backs, several starters in the offensive line and pass catchers, and oh, by the way, should have an okay defense, that's a top 15, top 20 team.
Absolutely.
It just is. And now, like, you're not sniffing the polls really. Yeah, they're 33rd or 34th, whatever. That's not what this has been about before. So again, you beat Penn State, you beat any team with a number 9 next to their name. I'm not even so concerned about the history and tradition of that rivalry. You beat a legitimate top 10 team from a power conference to start the year. yeah, you're onward and upward from there. I think that'd be pretty interesting to see what happens, and they haven't dealt with that success. The big thing here, the big thing here, Brian, I was just talking to my partner, Chris, about this. Neil Brown's 3-6 in openers as a head coach.
Mm-hmm.
He is 0-9 in the first game of the season against an FBS team.
Ooh.
They started 0-3 on the road the last 3 years with losses to power conference teams. They haven't been 1-0 at home for their home opener in a long, long time. So you're starting off on the back foot over and over and over again. And yeah, you know what? They could go 0-1. They can go 1-2 or 2-1 in non-conference play. But if they lose that Penn State game, and it's not a good indictment of where they think they are, it's back to the beginning again. Like, ho hum, we've been here before. Why would I be excited about this team in the Big 12 when I've seen this picture before? It's not changing. The lines are the same. The actors are the same. We probably have an idea what the story arc is going to be too. That's the opportunity right there, is that for something that has to be done that's never been done before, only one way and one day to do it.
Right. Absolutely. A big opportunity. I've covered it. Me and Fitz have kind of talked about it on the show. And we've got West Virginia. We've talked about West Virginia, about how their schedule, I shouldn't say set up for them last year, but it was on the easier side last year, and it is not this year. And we've got West Virginia in a bunch of games that can define, not necessarily define, but can kind of change the trajectory of what people are thinking about them. Because I think they got a big, big opportunity, Mike, to win some of these football games that I don't think a lot of people think they can. I personally think West Virginia is going to be better than what people believe that they are. I just do. I think they've got it together. Starts with the quarterback, what kind of leads me to what are some of the key things on offense that West Virginia fans, obviously you bringing back, quarterback, multiple receivers, multiple running backs, 3 offensive linemen. That's not usual in this day and age in college football. Are those some of the, obviously those are some of the key things. What are some of the, I guess, should I say, some of the pitfalls that maybe West Virginia offense that they're kind of looking to try to not dive into, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so much of the excitement and the optimism is about projecting continued gains. So, you can't have Garrett Green plateau or take a step back. You can't have the running game not develop. Your offensive line, maybe they won't be as good as the collective value of the 5 last year, but it shouldn't be a drop off. Their tight end play has to be better with more people involved. The receivers were good last year, but look at their stats. It's not all conference stuff. But again, you believe that freshmen will become sophomores and they'll get better. They're bigger, stronger, wiser. All that stuff has to happen. And that's true of every program. So then where does West Virginia find the success? And the secret of a program like this is that they're going to have to really excel in the margins. They've been very good, like in short yardage on third down. Their fourth down calls, like when to go for it, when to punt. I think that's maybe more scientific now. The old 12-year-old playing Madden or NCAA nowadays. They kind of have that mentality when it's smart to go for it, when it's not. But they do clean up on those too. So they've been able to stay in the field longer. And that led to them, being very prideful about snapping the ball a lot and owning time in possession because their defense had to be protected. They're going to have to do things like that, figure out where they're strong, where they have to be smart. And again, like those margins are narrow. They're going to have to exploit them to make them more impactful on their side on the scorecard, so to speak. If it goes to the judges, you want to have more evidence that you fought the better fight, you've had the better game, and you can create those variables that kind of line up for them. So, being good on third down, making the right decision on fourth down, when to go for it, punt it. And then, instead of 3, get 7 in the red zone too. They got to the red zone a ton last year, some of the most opportunities and the most snaps, but they kick a lot of field goals. They were top 20 in red zone possessions and red zone plays, which is good. That means they're moving the ball and they're holding on to it and keeping it away from the other team. Awesome. They were in the 70s in touchdown percentage. That doesn't add up. So can you become a top 20 team in touchdown percentage? That'd be great. But going from 70 to 20, that's tough. Go from 70 to 40. Go from 70 to 35. That would make a big difference for them. And for defense, just keep the ball in front of you. Like it's a long conversation about what they have to do to improve on defense. Some of it is just like who you play. And other teams practice, and the Big 12 has good offense too. But that's not so much a matter of margins there. That is getting off the field. That's getting the quarterback in the ground. That's having depth to consistently attack people with your second offensive line and, a second group of safeties. Those are more obvious things, but they have to happen. They've invested in personnel this year up front, linebacker especially. They brought in a ton of transfers in the secondary too. If they can't find 11, 14, 15, depending on personnel, it's going to be a long year for them, because the offense is going to be what it was. I don't think a ton of exotic surprises there too, but the defense cannot be what it was. That has to be exotic. That has to produce surprises. Otherwise, this isn't going to even up, and it's going to be a difficult, like you said, a difficult time getting into the schedule because it is plainly harder than it was last year.
Right. Well, one of the things, and again, you touched on this earlier, talking about, the red zone efficiencies. You can get by with that with some of the teams that they played last year. You can be in the 70s and you can still win those games. If you do that again this year, you're not going to win those games because the other teams are going to score. You just talked about the defense. I'm not saying West Virginia's defense is going to be bad or anything like that, but let's just be honest. College football is about scoring points these days. I mean, it just is. So you got to be able to do that. You can't be in the 70s, not against good competition, and continue to win the number of games that West Virginia won last year. Like I said, I think they've done a great job. Moving to this year, what do you think, or what would you say, not just necessarily you, Mike, but the coaching staff, fan base, everybody in general, as far as West Virginia, if it were a successful season, what does that look like? And if that doesn't happen, what, besides health, how did it get there if that didn't happen?
They were very disciplined last year. Like Garrett Green ran around a ton and threw the ball. And when you're running and throwing the ball, sometimes you make mistakes. He threw 4 interceptions. He lost no fumbles. He fumbled once last year. That is exquisite play by your quarterback when it comes to cleanliness and discipline. They were very good at pre-snap penalties and even post-snap penalties. If you go back just 2 years, just mistakes like knucklehead stuff before the snap, roughing the passer, lining up in the wrong spot. And those that still happens. You're dealing with college football players. You're going to have pre-snap stuff. You're going to have somebody who pops off and gets frustrated and hits somebody in the face. Okay, but they reeled that stuff in a whole lot better. And they were disciplined. They were smart last year, and they did not hurt themselves. Now, when things went bad, those things still popped up. So very famously, they lose 48-34 to Oklahoma State. They have the lead in the fourth quarter. They're getting a punt, and they have a collision with the punter and the gunner, and they lose the fumble. And then Ollie Gordon does Ollie Gordon stuff. He has 149 yards and 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. They lose by 14. But that's how small this margin is again. So we just talked about the margins. They really have to manage them and narrow them. So it's I think turnovers would be one thing, and discipline and penalties, and just like self-enhancing and self-endangering. Those are 2 different things. If you can help yourself with good play and avoiding mistakes, you're on your way, especially when your team, I wouldn't say that West Virginia is so far behind the arms race now, but not blue chippers, not super this, super that. They have to be very good at what they do. And, if you got to give yourself 5 downs to get a first down instead of 3 because you're constantly moving backwards, if you got to go 20 yards instead of 10, it's just harder. It's harder for everybody. So you don't want to do that. And then maintaining possession. They were pretty good last year, like I said, holding on to the ball, not putting it in danger. They did not force enough turnovers, which is one reason their defense struggled too. Now, I think it's kind of unfair for fans or coaches to assume you can wave a magic wand and your defense is going to create more turnovers. But man, they work on this. I mean, they work on tip drills, strip drills, sack drills, everything like that. And I don't know if you believe in luck, Brian, but just sometimes the ball doesn't bounce your way. They had the ball on the ground a couple of times last year, and it never came to them. Tip balls never came to them. They defended a lot of passes last year. They did not pick off a lot of passes. Just the law of averages says that has to come around. Now, can they be that active? Can they force the fumbles, get their hands on passes in the same quantity? Well, that's presumptuous too. But you figure if you're good at this and these are your habits and practicing in the games, eventually they're going to turn your way. So the long answer narrowed down here a little bit is they got to be really clean on offense with penalties and turnovers. They got to be destructive on defense, which is not just stacks and TFLs, but getting at quarterbacks and making them throw it early or off target, getting your hands on pass at the line of scrimmage or in a cornerback spot, and then catching tip balls, jumping on the ground and catching fumbles, ripping the ball out because you got a teammate who's going to make the tackle. If you don't, all right, I can hang on for a second, try to pry this ball out. They're going to have to be, like I said, more intent on creating those plays to get the ball out to just kind of create some havoc out there, because this didn't happen quite enough last year to even out the work they did in offense.
Gotcha. Well, Mike, I appreciate you taking the time today, man. Like I said, I think West Virginia, the schedule gets tougher. It starts off extremely tough right off the bat. I think that's a game they can win. Like I said, I'm not that big of a Penn State. I think they're okay. I don't know. It is what it is. Maybe it's a personal thing with me and Penn State. But I think West Virginia's got a real big opportunity, not just for them, but to set the Big 12 conference in general to take a big step forward. So I appreciate you taking the time, and we will talk to you soon, my man.
Thanks, Brian.
All right. Thank you.